Good morning. Welcome back to the Deep 404. There is a lot going on at the moment, both in Ukraine and in Israel. I think I'll start today talking a little bit about what's happening in Israel. A confidential US report, reportedly from the Defense Intelligence Agency, has been released, and the Washington Post has commented on this. What the report has said is that the US feel that Israel would be unlikely, or the IDF would be unlikely to be successful if they were to open a second front against Hezbollah in the north. The report seems to feel that the Israeli forces would be stretched too thinly if they are undertaking their campaign against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And if they were then to go and open a northern front with Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah are a much stronger force than Hamas. They have reportedly somewhere around 65,000 fighters. They've got about 2,500 of the Radwan group, which are a special operations group, reconnaissance, assassination, special ops type of group. They're focused on operating in that southern Lebanon, northern Israel, Galilee area there. Hezbollah also have reportedly over 150,000 missiles of various types. Some of them rockets, some of them guided missiles with various ranges that would reach down into areas of Israel, including reaching into Tel Aviv. There has been some interesting developments in the area. As we reported a few days ago, Israel pulled 5 brigades out of Gaza. So depending on how full they were, strength could have been up to 20,000 service people pulled out of Gaza. 2 or 3 of them were reportedly going for additional training, and then the other 2 wasn't reported what they were doing, what was happening with them. Perhaps, I'm just speculating here because I don't know this for certain, but perhaps they are being pulled out to release the pressure on Gaza in terms of the IDF requirements to be there, and instead freeing them up to prepare and move north. Now, this all sort of ties in with some other developments in the last few days. We've had US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in the Middle East for the last few days, visiting 9 different nations there. Pardon me. Including Israel and the West Bank, and there's still fighting going on in the West Bank, skirmishes there between Israeli settlers and Palestinians in that area. Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. So if we look at the map there, you can see he's really been all around the place. Now, reportedly, the reason for Tony Blinken to be there has been to attempt to get in front of Israeli politicians and military personnel in their comments and their decisions, as there is a feeling that while Hezbollah may not be looking for a full war with Israel at this stage, that Israel may be looking to escalate, may be looking to draw a response from Hezbollah, which is significant enough to then allow Israel to start a campaign of targeting Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon, more so than they already are. There are already skirmishes and attacks going on between Hezbollah and Israel, so it's not like nothing has started. It's just that it hasn't become full throttle at this stage. So Tony Blinken has been there, apparently trying to convince the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu not to escalate things. He was meeting yesterday with Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, we have some reports that have come out from that And this is after he's met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia and Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan of the United Arab Emirates. In those meetings that he had, he said that those nations are interested in pursuing normalization with Israel, but a two-state solution is a requirement for that to occur. Now, a two-state solution is not something that Israel wants, not something that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, wants. And so that brings us to sort of an impasse at this stage, where it seems as though in order to get support for Israel, normalization again for Israel, there is going to need to be some agreement, an acknowledgement on their behalf that a Palestinian state will exist and will exist under Palestinian control. This is what Tony Blinken has also said after speaking to the Arab leaders in the area. What has happened, however, in that yesterday in his meeting with President Netanyahu, where he has obviously relayed this as the desire of the Arab nations, what we have seen is that Israel has today put its hospitals in the north of the country on high alert. So I would imagine, you can be fairly certain in presuming that Benjamin Netanyahu was reading the papers like the rest of us and knew full well what the response from the Arab nations was, that yes, they would look to normalise relations with Israel once this occupation of Gaza has ended and once there is some firm commitment to a two-state solution. Now, the two-state solution, as I say, is not something that Israel is going to support or go for. So after Tony Blinken has had his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, it seems as though Israel has decided that they will not agree to that and that they are eager to pursue conflict with Hezbollah. Now, if the Americans are circulating that their assessment is that Israel will not succeed in a conflict with Hezbollah, and there has been some talk from the Israeli side this week of a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. And now this may be due to just some of the activity that has happened in this week. An IDF radar site, the Mount Meron Air Control and Radar site, was attacked by Hezbollah, and was it damaged to some extent. If you just give me a moment here, I'll just find a quick video of this. Oh, okay. Perhaps I've got the wrong. Give me one moment. Apologies for this. Is it this one? We'll just see if we can find it. If not, there we go. This one here. And I'll just speed it up a little bit to where it gets quite interesting. But you can see there the radar domes. You can see some rocket strikes landing in the foreground. However, there do appear to be a number of strikes that have hit the radar equipment of the facility. Now, this facility is important because allegedly it allows the Israelis to control their, there we go, one strike hitting one of the radar domes. You can see the explosion on the near side and debris shooting out the other side. And there is a second and then perhaps a third one of these radar units hit Now, this site apparently allows the Israelis to control their aircraft in the northern areas of Israel. So this will have some level of impact. Obviously, it won't be the only ability that Israel has to control its air defences in that area, but it's going to have some significant impact upon them and operating in this area. So that has happened with Hezbollah targeting and striking that. Sheba Farms area, 6 missiles were launched yesterday, and damage appears to have occurred around that area. There was an attack on Haifa inside Israel-controlled territories, where Iraqi Islamic Resistance, which is a Shiite faction, reportedly used a strategic missile, a cruise missile, to strike at Haifa. There has also been going on Hezbollah leader, Hezbollah stands for Party of God. Yesterday, Wissam Tawi, who was struck in a Hezbollah leader was killed. Wissam Tawi. Today, the IDF spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, confirms that the IDF targeted Ali Hussein Burji, a senior Hezbollah leader. So that's about the third strike in about a week now of senior Hamas figures being attacked by Israeli forces. There has also been, interestingly enough, Lebanese army attacks on the Lebanese armed forces. So this has been attacks by Israel on the Lebanese armed forces, or the LAF. Now, the LAF is considered by the US as a defender of southern Israel and an opposition to Hezbollah. Yet there are reports that the Israeli Defense Forces have struck since October the 7th 34 times against Lebanese armed forces locations. On December the 5th, Israeli tank fire resulted in the killing of a LAF soldier and injury of others. On December the 8th, Israeli fire containing white phosphorus hit LAF facilities. On November 4th, an attack against the LAF position at Sada damaged the LAF bases there. So the US have spoken to Israel about this, and a spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces said that any harm caused to other forces is unintentional. Nir Dinar is the spokesman who said any harm to civilians or other forces is unintentional. Such incidents are reviewed in order to improve operational precautions and to assure accountability when necessary. So the Israeli Defense Forces apparently not too concerned with who they might be striking in southern Lebanon, perhaps themselves considering even the Lebanese armed forces, who are apparently opposition to Hezbollah, still not an ally of Israel itself. So with all of those things going on, coming back to why it is that Benjamin Netanyahu might be looking to escalate and begin a conflict with Hezbollah, the reasoning is that it may be less for military reasons and more for political reasons. As the current conflict with Hamas is politically popular within Israel, the longer that Benjamin Netanyahu can keep the war going, or a conflict going, the longer he can raise his chances of keeping his political livelihood afloat while he's still in power and the war's ongoing. He stays in power. Once the war stops, questions will be asked about Israeli intelligence failures in the lead up to the October 7 Hamas attacks, which he'll need to answer for. He can probably stave them off to some extent now while he's busy dealing with the conflict. Also, his own personal court cases relating to corruption, they will flare up and take centre stage again. And there is a large call for his resignation in Israel. While the conflict itself is considered popular and supported by Israeli public, Netanyahu himself isn't that popular. So leading a war campaign kind of keeps him above all of that for a while. Also, another reason may be that if Israel escalates with Hezbollah and Hezbollah responds and enough of an attack and damage is done to Israel, that the US may be drawn further into this conflict. Now, Israel is aware, much like America is, that getting into a direct conflict with Hezbollah will be very difficult for Israel to succeed in. While they may ultimately succeed, they have the same challenge here of fighting an idea rather than just fighting individuals, and they're fighting a force of 150,000 missiles and guided rockets that can be used against the civilian population and military targets within Israel. That politically is going to be challenging for Benjamin Netanyahu if he finds that there are cities within Israel coming under constant attack from Hezbollah. But what he might be aiming to do here is get to a position where he is able to draw the US in to support Israel and effectively have the US assist in the conflict with Hamas and with Hezbollah and use the US's force and might and military power to overwhelm those two opponents of Israel in the Middle East at this stage. So Israel can't win on its own. The US could come in with its aircraft carrier, could return the Gerald Ford, for example, or another aircraft carrier to the area. You could use submarines from the Mediterranean or whatever it might be to weaken Hezbollah. But then if that is to happen, if the US were to get directly involved, then it becomes very likely that we would see an escalation and retribution from Iran and possibly Turkey getting involved as well. There are, of course, differences. There are differences between Iran and Turkey. Now, Iran is 90 to 95% Islamic in its demography, and of those, 90% of those Islamic members of Iran are Shia Muslims, and about 10% are Sunni. ISIS is Sunni. The Muslim Brotherhood, which President Erdogan is the leader of from Turkey, they are Sunni, so in opposition to the Shia of Iran. So there is a natural, and has been for a long time, a conflict between those two, with different parties warring against each other in Syria there. But the US directly involved against Hezbollah, which is Iran-supported Hamas. If that extended that conflict into the West Bank, then it's very likely that we might see those Muslim nations putting their own differences aside and have Iran and Turkey engaging in the Middle East. Turkey would, I imagine, want to be involved in that, to be seen as a powerful force within the Middle East if it came to a proper conflict between the US and Israel. Also, Turkey has a large army. Reports that it could, within a couple of months, have 2 million men available to fight, which is a sizable force to be fighting that Middle East area. Things are still heating up in other areas around that part of the world too. Greek Foreign Minister Yorgos Geropetritis has announced the launch of a cooperation program to supply advanced F-35 fighter jets. So Greece, he has said, will enter the F-35 fighter jet program. Now, this is a program that President Erdogan of Turkey was in until 2019. In 2019, he made the decision to purchase a Russian S-400 air defense system, and at that stage, Turkey was removed from the F-35 program. The US Defense and Pentagon and government feeling that it was unacceptable that F-35s could be maintained and based in Turkey while Turkey was operating the S-400 system. Their concern being that the S-400 system would learn the signature of the F-35s and that information could then be shared with other nations, and the US didn't want that information being shared. So, US Secretary of State Tony Blinken has reportedly just been there talking with the Greek foreign minister about this. And he has said that the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis and I discussed our strong relationship and cooperation as NATO allies. We appreciate Greece's leadership on regional issues, including assistance to Ukraine and efforts to increase freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. Now, this will irk President Erdogan of Turkey. Him being out of the F-35 program, with Greece now coming into the program. If we just have a quick look at the map here, you can see Turkey up here and Greece just here. So they are neighbours there, and not the happiest of neighbours here. And clearly for the United States, if they are now able to put F-35s into Greece, then that gets them close to Syria, Lebanon, Israel, that area here. There's one thing that I just want to talk about before I lead into Ukraine and what's going on there. Now, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, has reportedly been in ICU for a number of days after what's been reported as complications following undisclosed surgery. He, in the late December, apparently went very late December, was quiet. On the 2nd of January, his Deputy Secretary of Defence, Kathleen Hicks, assumed his role while she was on holiday, but apparently was not aware why until the 4th. So there's a lot of weird reporting around this. Now, the 2nd of January was when Ukraine concluded some of its big military strikes, missile strikes around Kiev, and reports there that there were some NATO locations targeted there. On the 4th of January, Lloyd Austin has reportedly informed President Biden and others and Secretary of State. He was in ICU for at least 4 days. He has now been transferred from the intensive care unit, but remains in hospital and is experiencing discomfort. This is interesting. A report that I've seen today, where Speaker of the House, a Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has reportedly said that Lloyd Austin needs to be removed from his post because he hasn't been transparent in informing the Biden administration that he has been battling cancer. And this is what has happened. And so that he has reportedly had undisclosed cancer surgery and then went into ICU after that. That may well be the case. He's still out of intensive care, reportedly, but still in hospital. Now, there is speculation going around, and this is just speculation at this time, and the only reason that I'm mentioning it now is because I have seen it mentioned by DEMA on the Military Summary channel. Now, DEMA has a team of people working with him, good connections, and normally has very good information. However, I have some concerns about this, and he himself has said this is just speculation, but he's speculating that perhaps Lloyd Austin was in Kiev on an undisclosed mission and that he may have been wounded in those missile strikes. I don't have anything else to back it up at this stage. I'm just mentioning it because DEMA has mentioned it. However, in the past 2 weeks, if this is speculation, he's called that out, but there is a second item of Demas which is somewhat of concern, which was around him reporting that there were F-16s operating in Ukraine and that the F-16s may have ambushed a Russian jet. Again, there doesn't seem to have been anything to back that up. And so I'm not sure where he's got that information from, but that doesn't seem to be correct. The Lloyd Austin one, it may not be correct either. While there is some strangeness about it, the fact that he was in ICU for a number of days, the fact that it wasn't immediately mentioned to Biden and Blinken and his secretary, the fact that they didn't all come out straight away and say, yes, he's been in for, unfortunately for surgery for cancer, and there's been some complications, and that's what's happening, and it's all fine. The fact that they didn't know what was going on plays into rumours like this, that he could have been wounded unexpectedly, rushed back by air ambulance to the States, in hospital, in ICU, almost dead, and then survived. And then in all that scrambling, people not quite sure of what story to put out and how long to keep it quiet and see, was he going to live, was he going to die? So this could be true. We may find out more about it. I think it will probably come down to whether we see Lloyd Austin appear in the near future. And if we do, how we see him appear. If it is in just a released press statement, just his words saying, oh, I'm okay, I'm feeling fine and recovering, which I've seen one statement like that he's thanking the hospital that he was in. Or will we see video of him? And if we see video of him, what shape will he be in? What will the video be like? Will he be standing at a lectern, walking and talking? Will he be in a hospital bed? Will he have a bandage on his head? These sort of things will be telling in the coming days if we do or if we don't see that, as to whether there is some truth to this story that perhaps he was injured. I don't know if he was. But regardless of that, things are bad in Ukraine for a number of reasons. First of all, Congress is back, and funding for Ukraine and for Israel hasn't been immediately provided. So there is still this ongoing dispute between the House, which Mike Johnson heads, and the Senate, where the Senate would like $64 billion, please, for Ukraine and $16 billion for Israel. And the House, who are Republican-led, are saying, sure, no worries, but in order to get that, we want you to do something concrete, you Democrats and Biden administration, about securing our southern border, because we're having problems with all the people coming over the border undocumented at the moment. And that's a real problem for the Democrats, as we've mentioned, because the Democrats are using those undocumented migrants coming across the border as a way to swell their voting base by announcing that, if you come into the country, we'll give you free health care, which has just happened apparently, Gavin Newsom announcing that in California. If you come into the country, well, we might like to pass a bill where if you join the army, you'll get citizenship, and then you can vote. And who will you vote for? Well, you probably vote for the party that historically you voted for, and the ones that gave you this opportunity to come into America undocumented. So this is a problem for the Democrats to actually do something to shut this down, because they like the numbers that are coming in. The numbers are growing under Biden. The numbers of undocumented migrants coming into the United States is growing. I think I've seen something that's on projection to be within his term 12 million people, which will be more than perhaps twice what was in Obama's and twice what was in Trump's. Maybe Trump's was 4 million, Obama's 5 million, and Biden's looking like 12 million. So that's a lot of people coming in, which if you think they're going to become Democrat voters, you would want to keep them coming in. So that funding hasn't gone ahead. Just of note, on funding for Israel, Israel does have a funding package which is in play, which gives them $38 billion over 10 years. So they're getting $3.8 billion a year already. Israel is the nation which receives the most military aid from anywhere from the United States. Perhaps in the last 2 years, that has been superseded for those 2 years by the amount given to Ukraine. But normally, Israel is the most. Now, what has happened since Congress has been back is that the House and the Senate leaders have announced the outline of a $1.6 trillion spending deal for government funding in 2024. This still has to be agreed and signed off, but they sort of shaped out what it looks like. And of that, there is 886 billion in defence spending and 704 billion in non-defence spending. So nearly 0.9 trillion defence spending and 0.7 trillion non-defence spending. So that money for Israel and Ukraine is in there, but it still needs to be signed off. They haven't got it yet. So there's funding problems for Ukraine. 2 nights ago, not last night, but the night before, for the first time, it seems, the Ukrainian air defence has not claimed to have shot down the bulk of all missiles fired by Russia into Kiev and into Ukraine. Now, this is different to normal. Normally, we know from just physics that Ukraine is not shooting down all of the missiles that Russia is firing. The speed of the Kh-32s at Mach 3 to Mach 4.6, the speed of the Kinjals at Mach 10 means that these are not being shot down by Ukrainian air defence. They just don't have the capability to do that, and that's been noted by many people. There's even been reports from the Ukrainian air defence themselves that they're not shooting these down. However, the government of Ukraine and then the military of Ukraine comes out with these daily reports indicating that, yes, the bulk of them were shot down. The other ones were probably defective, that didn't hit and nothing was struck. However, in Kiev over the last week, we've had video coming out of Kiev which has clearly shown that missiles have been striking their targets and damage has been done. And reports on Telegram channels coming out about that as well. But interestingly, now this time the Ukrainians have come out and haven't claimed to have shot them all down. So this seems to indicate a change, and perhaps the Ukrainian government not feeling now that it can hide any longer the damage being done by the Russian missile strikes. So that's not good. There are reports that members of the Verkhovna Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament, have discussed that President Zelensky may be done as president and that he won't be able to gain another term. He has, of course, suspended elections, so he's delaying that anyhow, but should elections occur in the future, that he would not be able to win those elections. It seems that even those people who have remained in Ukraine through the fighting are starting now to recognise that they are not winning this, and primarily it seems that the mobilisation, the threat of mobilisation to more and more people, even people who you would normally consider to be unfit for military conscription, is denting the approval that Zelensky has held until this time. There are reports on that topic of mobilisation from Ukrainian Telegram channels that large numbers of Ukrainian citizens are closing their bank cards and withdrawing all the money from their bank accounts. This is reportedly being done because the new law on mobilisation, which will come into effect either today or tomorrow, the law specifies that financial and property restrictions for people who are choosing to dodge the mobilisation request, including blocking their accounts and their cards, can occur. So it seems that a number of people in the country who don't wish to be mobilised are going to avoid the call when it comes, but want to hang on to their money, so they're withdrawing that and maxing out their cards or shutting down their credit cards now. Other things, which again, this is just a wave of bad news coming out for Ukraine. The head of the Donetsk People's Republic, this is the Russian-appointed head, Denis Pushilin, has again called Odessa and Mykolaiv as Russian cities. Now, this comes after Dmitry Medvedev, the Russian secretary of the Russian Defense Council, came out a week or so and said that a number of the big Ukrainian cities, he said a number of the cities here, Kharkiv and Kiev and Dnipro, are traditionally Russian cities. And he has then gone on to say And now Denis Pushilin is saying that Odessa and Mykolaiv are Russian cities. All of this kind of lines up with what I've said in the past, is that I think that ultimately the Russian game plan has now evolved to taking all of the Ukrainian oblasts to the east of the Dnieper River, and adding into that Mykolaiv and some of Odessa, the southern part of Odessa at least, so that the new Russian borders can encompass all of the port access that Ukraine would previously have had. So this is not good. Other news, there are now reports from Ukrainian channels that they have retrieved the wreckage of the new jet version of the Jiran, or the original Shahed 131 drones. Now, the original Shahed 131s, or Jiran 2 drones, were piston propeller-driven planes. The new one is a jet version. The Ukrainian sources were showing photos of debris, and it appears to show the air intake cowling, which sits on the back of the Jiran drone to feed its jet engine. They apparently travel now at 500 kilometers an hour, those jet-powered drones. So again, evolution in drone capability and drone technology we're seeing all the time in this conflict. The original piston ones being upgraded to be jet ones to be faster. Other items here. The Ukraine Defense Ministry has reportedly purchased 50,000 sets of military uniforms for women. The head of the ministry, Rustem Umarov, has said for the first time the Ministry of Defense purchased 50,000 sets of women's uniforms, 100,000 electric warmers, 15,000 active headphones, wrote Umarov. So this is a bad sign. If you are a nation in war and you are starting to mobilize and conscript your women to fight, which it appears is what is happening here. These are military uniforms. If the women were being conscripted to work in industry to support the war effort, they wouldn't need uniforms. The 100,000 electric warmers, I'm not sure what they refer to or what they are. Someone may be able to tell me in the comments. 15,000 active headphones. Again, headphones and uniforms give the impression that these are things being used in operational fighting. So again, not a good sign for a nation whose population was around 43 million at the start of the conflict, lost apparently 11 million with people leaving, either immigrating to Russia or to European nations. Plus obviously the loss, the death toll of the getting close to 2 years of fighting, to now being forced into mobilising and conscripting your women into the front line. And these will be frontline positions. We've already seen that. Now, the roles may not necessarily be complete combat roles in all cases. We have seen examples of field psychologists, women, but they have been reports of them being killed in the Kharkiv, Kupiansk region. And other video we've seen of women soldiers on the front line surrendering to Russians, claiming that they were pregnant. Others in a military role in a trench under heavy fire with a Russian tank, sounding as though it were about to roll over the trench position that they were in. So again, this isn't good news for the nation of Ukraine. The Abrams tanks. Now, there's some talk that the Abrams may actually begin to see some action in Kupiansk, in the northern area of the front line. However, the Abrams have their own challenges. There are reports from Ukrainian Telegram channels that they need constant cleaning of their air filters to keep the engines running in them. They have a big gas turbine engine. They don't have like a diesel piston engine. They have a gas turbine thing. Looks like the sort of thing that you could mount in a jet. Very high powered Gives that massive tank 1,500 horsepower, apparently. But they're very delicate turbine engine. They can't have any debris being sucked into the turbines or they destroy them. And so this means you need to be constantly performing maintenance. Now, if you're out in combat operations, if it's snowing and muddy, those sort of things cause problems where it's difficult to keep them maintained. So keeping them operating for a long time, they're not hardy, these tanks, it seems. Keeping them operating for a long time on the front line is difficult without having logistics and maintenance close by to keep them going. Also, reports are that their armour on top is a weakness for them. Now, when they operated in the Middle East, in Iraq, they had US air support at all times. There wasn't any Iraq Air Force flying around. And in that period of time, there was very little drone activity either. So it was unlikely that the tops of those tanks were going to come under a great deal of threat. In Ukraine, very different. We have loitering munitions, FPV drones, which are capable of dropping tank sort of grenades on top of tanks. So that seems to be a problem. The kamikaze drones, the Lancets, are a problem now. Remember, these tanks, the Abrams, have been around since 1980. So when they were originally developed, there was no consideration for top-down drone attacks on them. Also, there's reports the version of the Abrams that are here have been stripped down of some of their features. Perhaps the US not wanting to send its best and brightest versions of the tanks in case they are captured by the Russians, as has happened with instances of all of the other NATO equipment that's been sent so far. We've seen footage of Russian forces capturing NATO equipment, towing it back, no doubt analysing it to understand how it operates and reverse engineering it, looking for weaknesses. Finally, any Abrams on the front line will be a target for Russians. There has been, apparently bounties put on the heads of the top flight NATO equipment. An Abrams tank, like a Challenger or a Leopard, would be another one of those. Also, some reporting about the Leopards, that they're finding it tough under war conditions. Apparently 10,000, they get about 10% of the mileage in peacetime to what they get in peacetime. So 10,000 kilometres in wartime is equivalent to the maintenance and damage to the tank of 100,000 kilometres in peacetime. So they also require complex maintenance tasks, which must be carried out in some cases at a factory, can't be done at the front line. A group of German delegates went to Lithuania, which is a repair centre for Leopards, and they came away very unhappy with the number of defects and repairs they've seen reported there. Apparently, attempts at repair by the Ukrainian military lead to additional damage to the Leopards, which in some cases may require them to then be sent from the front line back to Lithuania. So again, while these tanks are powerful engines in the right environments, they can operate well, but without air support, they're susceptible to drones, and without the proper maintenance capabilities close by, and this is becoming more and more difficult for Ukraine as those Russian missile strikes destroy their repair facilities within the country. As we see here, they have to be shipped out to Lithuania to be repaired. It makes it harder and harder to keep them operational at the front line. So a lot of things that aren't good on the sort of front lines for Ukraine. Just some other developments now relating to the ongoing European conflict there. US government has met with some defence contractors. So Jake Sullivan, the head of the White House Security Council, has reportedly met with about 10 arms manufacturers. This is Reuters reporting this. About 4 of them have been named. And interestingly, the 4 that have been named of the 10 are Palantir Technologies, which supplies Ukraine with AI systems that identify targets for cruise missiles. Anduril Industries, a developer of drones, including military drones, and they're associated with the owners of Palantir. Fortum, developer of a drone catcher. And Skydio, a major manufacturer of FPV drones. So these companies that were at the meeting, apparently the 10, were already working directly with the Kiev government, and Bloomberg has written. But it's interesting that of the 4 announced, we're not hearing things like Raytheon there, or maybe Boeing or something like that. But these are newer, it seems, industries, and all focused on drones and AI technology, and Anduril and Palantir, the AI and drone one apparently associated with each other, so no doubt AI capability on drones. As I've just reported earlier this week, the Russians now on their FPV drones having AI image detection capabilities and target locking, such that an FPV drone being flown by a pilot, where the pilot's receiving a video feed back from the drone, can guide it onto its target. Well, now the drones are able to detect and lock onto the target, so that if the video feed is lost due to whatever reason it might be, interference from an electronic warfare system on the target, the pilot losing the feed doesn't matter anymore, because the drone can now control itself onto the target for its final attack. So again, big advancements in drone technology and capability, and it seems that the highest level, with the White House Security Council Jack Sullivan leading a meeting with these 10 arms manufacturers, talking specifically, it seems, around drone technology and combining that with AI technology to be able to assist Ukraine in it counteracting the Russian capabilities in that space. Obviously, whatever is being learnt here on the front with Ukraine is being flowed back into the US and NATO and the UK, and we will see this appear, this drone technology and advanced capability appearing everywhere where war happens now. Wars of the past where drones weren't a key part of that are gone. All wars now are going to be drone wars going forwards. Just a little bit here. German farmers are striking. Big strikes across Germany. If you've seen some of the footage of it, thousands of farmers out in tractors and trucks and that sort of thing, and hay balers, all sorts of equipment, farming equipment. They are striking, and it was an unannounced strike because subsidies are ending. They were announced in December. And they are unhappy as the German government's continuing to fund Ukraine's war effort, but is stopping subsidies to the farmers in Germany. Farmers have been seen with signs such as "No farmers equals no beer," and they have blocked crossings on the border with France. Last week, there were transport and education workers protesting, and this is due to inflation and the weakening economy in Germany, higher energy prices, higher fuel prices. So the farmers are saying that without the subsidies, they will go out of business because they just can't they can't afford to continue producing. Now, German rail workers are next, scheduled for later this week, that they will strike for 3 days. Now, in some of the footage of the protests, it looks as though there is growing support for the AfD, which is the Alternative for Germany party. They have been seeing strengthening growth in Germany, and are likely to co-opt some of this dissent and anger at the government now for their own purposes, and probably roll some of these ideas into their own policies to ensure a strengthening of their base with these farmers, transport, rail workers, to ensure that their vote goes to the AfD. An NTV poll in Germany found that 91% of the respondents supported the farmers, believing them justified in their actions. The next election is in 2025 in Germany, so not that far away now. Although the Chancellor Scholz is already under increasing pressure to step down. If he were to do so, it would be likely that his Defence Minister, Boris Pistorius, could take that position. So as these sort of protests rise and the government looks to find a way to keep its voting base and keep itself afloat during the next election, who knows, there may be a loss of Olaf Scholz just to keep people happy and indicate that some change is being made there. In terms of the impact that these blockades are having. So these farmers are blockading roads, access in and out of the country, on-ramps to freeways and things like that. Niels Bush-Peterson, who is the Director General of the Berlin-Brandenburg Trade Association, has stated that hundreds of Berlin supermarkets will not receive supplies tomorrow unless the situation changes suddenly. We have to assume that shelves could remain empty tomorrow. So clearly, with farmers blockading the movement and supply of goods to supermarkets, the supermarkets are starting to run down. People will be hearing this. People will be bulk buying, hoarding things, storing things. So that is then going to start the general public clamouring, and this becomes a bit of a knife edge for the farmers and the government to manage, and they will both be trying to position this one way or the other. The farmers will be looking to turn the public opinion against the government and be able to say, look, it's the government that's causing you to be running out of food now. We're just helping protest. If that happens, the government's in real trouble. The government, of course, will be looking to push the narrative the other way and saying, look, it's these ugly, grimy farmers who are clogging up the streets and are stopping you from getting food. You need to revolt against the farmers. As I say, there will be people going both ways, but whichever way that axe falls will determine, I think, the outcome here of whether the farmers will get their continued subsidies and the government will back down, or if the government will be able to effectively take some of the military and shift them. We'll see what happens there. Just in terms of blockades there, now for Ukraine, the Polish blockade of trucks travelling into Ukraine is continuing. That's 2 months old now. That's been going on for over 2 months. There are reports that at one of the entryways into Ukraine, there's over 1,000 trucks backed up, waiting for 2 weeks to slowly creep through that queue. And that the queue of trucks extends back 32 kilometres, 20 miles. These blockages are happening by the truckers because there was previously a limit system on how many Ukrainian trucks could enter Poland and the EU. Now, that limit system has been dropped by the EU. The permit system has been dropped. And so now unlimited number of Ukrainian trucks can enter through Poland into the EU. Of course, the Polish truck drivers are seeing this as a threat to their operation, their existence. And the sentiment going from them doesn't sound great. There's a father and son who was interviewed. They have 5 trucks, and their statement was that Ukrainian drivers, they drive around like they're members of the EU, like us, and they take away our bread, they take away our work. So you understand your nation's joined the EU for certain benefits, and then suddenly you've got no benefit compared to a nation that's not in the EU. So what was the point of doing that? And so they're blockading against this. There are also farmers are now in Poland are also starting to perhaps protest in Poland, much like the German ones. Here they are looking for the Polish government to offer subsidies for corn because prices are low. And again, part of the problem being, they're saying, is because of increased Ukrainian imports. So those farmers struggling, cheap stuff coming in, they can't sell theirs, pushes the price down, they can't afford to produce. So problems in a number of European nations at the farming level. Now, if your farmers have got problems, you've got real problems in your nation because your farmers are one of those engines of the nation. If the farmers are prosperous, if they're doing well, they're making money, they're growing, they're buying farms, they're increasing more, you're able to export to other nations, you're a wealthy, prosperous country. If your farmers are taking time off to protest, if they're saying they're going broke, if they can't meet costs and they can't continue to produce and your farms are shutting down, whether you think it might be great for some alleged green catastrophe policy that you're implementing, it's bad for your nation and your people. You want to support your farmers and keep them producing and growing. Finally, just a little bit on the attacks in Belgorod. So the attacks continue from Ukraine. Yesterday, there were reports that 10 Vampire multiple launch rocket system missiles were fired. Now, it seems the bulk of these, Russian Ministry of Defense is reporting that the bulk of these were intercepted. However, there were injuries. So it's not clear on whether perhaps some did make it through and struck civilian areas, or if the injuries were due to the missiles being fired over civilian areas of Belgorod and then being intercepted, and injuries coming from the intercepted debris from the missiles, as you would expect. If these missiles were fired at a city, air defence intercepts them over the city, there's a likelihood that those missile parts will come crashing into buildings and where people are. The reports are there that 3 people were injured by shrapnel. Interestingly, on this, there's a report from a French journalist, Magali Barth, and she says Ukraine has to fight in a different way. If they really start undermining parts of the territory on the other side of the border, on the Russian side, we will see this barrier between civilians and military installations disappear. And so here she's talking about if the Ukrainians keep shelling Belgorod and firing on Belgorod, which is a civilian area and not a military area, she said that's a risk. That's going to affect the Western countries. At the moment, it's already very difficult to support Ukraine, including financially. If these terrorist attacks on Belgorod intensify, if there are more and more victims, it will become difficult for the foreign countries to continue to support this, to finance the Ukrainians. The West does not support this strategy of Ukraine. So this is interesting, coming from a French journalist, just indicating that the tactic of shelling into Belgorod, a civilian area, but whatever purpose it's serving, the Ukrainians think it's serving, it may in fact be detrimental to them overall, and that she is indicating that the Western nations can't really get behind the shelling of these civilian areas. Similar to what's happening in Israel, the US trying to get now Israel to calm down its shelling of civilian areas, again, in part because in both cases, it's highly likely that the weapons that are being used to shell these civilians are US made. In Israel, probably most certainly. In the case of Belgorod, I think some of them are Czech weapons, but there's quite likely US supplied shells being fired in there as well. Okay, last thing, just a little bit of a brief update of some of the frontline areas. Around Bakhmut, there's Russian advances in the Bogdanovka area. Most of that Bogdanovka area appears to be in the grey zone at the moment. Ukraine armed forces are continuing to resist in the Kromovo area, but the Russian airstrikes are hitting strongholds close to Chasov Yar. In Klesievka and Andriivka, to the south of Bakhmut, no real changes in the last day or so of fighting there. In Mariinka direction, there are advances in the dam area towards Georgievka, and battles towards Novomykhailovka continue to the south, but no significant progress. Apparently, the Ukrainians have retreated to the centre of that village, but the industrial area and the farm area are still in the grey zone there. In Avdiivka, which is where the Russians have been encircling for some time now, Avdiivka, Russian armed forces advance near the Daka village, which is east of the coke plant and south of the treatment facility. So Russian advances continuing there. Ukrainian forces concentrating at the coke plant and the central part of the city and are setting up fortifications and observation positions in 9-story buildings. Apparently UAV repeater units, so Ukrainian drone repeater units on the roofs of Ukrainian armed forces buildings, and ones they're occupying, are complicating the identification of the drone operators for the Russian forces, as the repeaters allow the drone operators to be further in the rear, so they may not actually be where the initial signal that might be traced to. The signal gets traced to a repeater, but the original signal's coming from somewhere else. Kupiansk direction, no significant changes recorded. In the Seversk direction, no significant changes, but there is some attention given in this area as Ukrainians are anticipating a breakthrough in this area reportedly. And then in the Krasny Liman direction, Russian forces from Kremenaya and the forested area continue the offensive towards Turnov. Ukraine military analysts are suggesting the front line may soon follow the watershed border. in this translation, I'm not entirely sure what that means. If they are talking there that may follow some water line, move to some water line, or if they are suggesting that the front line here may, in a watershed move, may collapse in that area, which I think is perhaps more likely the interpretation. No significant changes in the Torsk area, and Ukrainian losses confirmed due to a strike on a Ukrainian armed forces headquarters in Krasny Liman. All right, that's it for today. Look, if you're enjoying the channel and you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe or share the channel, the links to someone that you think might enjoy the channel. Thank you very much. I hope you're enjoying it, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.